Aquarian Nation Radio is David Pakman. David has been a pioneer and entrepreneur in the digital music space as long as the space existed. And, well, he sort of set everything up to get people up and running to download music. Hey, David.
Hi, Christine.
I remember Dave Pakman from Apple. That's what nobody knows that, but Dave Pakman used to be the Apple guy, didn't you, Dave?
I worked at Apple for a long time, about 5 years.
What did you do there?
Among other things, I started a group there called the Apple Music Group, which was it was in the mid-'90s, and I was trying to convince Apple that music was going to be important, and there was this collision coming between the music industry and the technology industry.
Right.
And while that's obvious now, it wasn't obvious back then to everybody.
So you had a lot of foresight then?
Maybe.
Quite intuitive, an Aquarian intuitive.
I think I was just trying to do two things I liked a lot, computers and music.
So
Right.
Could it be in a way that you were like, if you were going to sort of transfer it over to like a record label, you were kind of like the A&R guy. So you were looking ahead to the future, finding the new big thing.
Technology A&R. Come in here, dear boy, have a cigar. You're going to go far. Yeah.
No, but the good thing about Dave was he's one of them guys, like he just fixed our computer in here. So you could always do that. If anything went wrong, you could just call up, where's David Pakman? He always returned your calls. You always got the call back. Hey, Francis, what's going on? Dave, I don't know what's going on. The music's playing backwards. Well, if you press da-da-da-da-da-da, and then it would all work. So he was...
In high school, that was called a geek. And now that's like the coolest thing in the world, to be able to completely deal with technology.
Well, it's literally the revenge of the nerds.
I know. It's how I get girls.
It is?
Well,
I thought you were married.
Well, it's how I got my wife. Because
Is your girlfriend now?
You two beautiful kids as well.
I do.
I'm going to tell your wife.
They didn't have a lot to do with technology.
Well, that's human technology, right?
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, I've known you for quite some time now. And you've always been somebody who has been, very quietly doing things behind the scenes that I never quite understood until now. And I guess you always had a sense that things were going to change.
I think it came down to this sort of David versus Goliath thing. I never really appreciated power in the hands of a few. Sort of when there's this big authoritative power that could sort of control what you listen to or who got to be famous or who got to be an artist, that always disturbed me. I'm a drummer and a songwriter, and I always wanted to try to make it big, right? So when I learned enough about the industry to know that, there were just a few hundred big white men who were really in charge of all that, I didn't take too kindly to understanding that. And when you saw technology coming in the early 90s as this basically something to challenge the old distribution system of music and media, it got pretty exciting, especially when I started to talk to those 100 white men who were, when I worked at Apple, we got to spend a lot of time talking to them and saying, what do you think was going to happen to the music industry and technology? And they didn't want to talk about it at all. Nothing. I don't know. I can't deal with computers. I don't have a computer on my desk. It means nothing. Technology is nothing. Go away. We control the world. And that's when I realized it was going to be a lot of fun.
Now, did you talk to like Steve Jobs and all that?
Well, Steve Jobs was not at Apple when I was at Apple. He had left already, and I'm sure he would have completely gotten it had I talked to him about it, but because he obviously gets it now.
Do you like him? Is he a cool guy?
Well, he's a difficult man.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean to say he's not a nice man, right? Because I trust your opinion. I know who you are as a person, so I would basically for the listeners out there, if the Packmeister says you're cool, you're pretty cool.
I would say that his accomplishments speak for himself. He has just repeatedly built great things and seen great things before other people have, and he also knows how to drive people to their best. That's something I know you can appreciate.
Right.
So, just based on those things, I think he's an incredible person.
Walk up to Brian Eno and say, Brian Eno.
So you saw problems in the way that music was being shaped by a handful of people. How did you go from like Apple to saying, hey, let's get this on the internet and people can download it and they can make it their own?
Well, in 1995, I was in a band that got a demo deal from Elektra. And I got the contract, and I actually read it. And the other members in the band didn't. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read. And the other members of the band were just real excited about, oh my God, Elektra's interested in us. And I actually read this thing. And if anyone has ever read a record company contract, especially the ones, pre-internet, they basically said that, we own everything. You own nothing. We may never pay you anything again. And it was a very lopsided, one-sided agreement that really made no sense to sign. It was just not even-handed. And because of that, I didn't want to sign the deal. And, of course, the rest of the band said, "Are you kidding me? This is our biggest break." I said, "This is our biggest break. This is our biggest failure. You know, if we do this, we'll be perpetually in the hands of this label that will make all decisions about us." And it really wasn't even a big record deal. It was like a demo deal. Basically said, we'll loan you $10,000 to make a record, and then we own it forever, even if we release it or not, and we may never pay you anything again for it.
But it's Elektra.
Right.
It's, hey, we all have heard of Elektra.
Well, when I saw how sort of lopsided it was, I felt like there had to be an alternative. And the reason there was no alternative is because the record industry controlled distribution. They controlled the manufacturing and the distribution of the CDs.
What does that mean?
So when you make a record, someone needs to manufacture a whole bunch of them for you. And that's one of the things the record company does. And then they actually put those records in trucks and they drive them in trucks that they own to all these different distribution centers around the United States and around the world, and then they truck them from those to the record stores. And it's very hard to get a record in a record store unless you go through that quote-unquote distribution network.
Yes.
And they basically own that. So if you make a record and you want to get it in every Sam Goody, Tower Record, Virgin Megastore, you pretty much can't do it unless you're part of the major label system.
And also, you got to be paying people off to get them in, because even with the record stores won't take your CD, they won't accept it. One of the things that nobody understands about the record business as well is the way that the money is sorted out. Let's say, for instance, Christine, you're an artist, right?
Okay.
And I'm a record company. I'm going to loan you. Now, don't forget that word, loan. That's an incredibly important word. LOAN in capital letters. Okay. 200 grand.
Okay.
Right? You're going to make a record so I'm loaning you the money to make a record that I own. So after the record company's loaned the artist the money, the artist doesn't own the record company owns it.
Even if you pay it back.
Even if you pay it back, they still own it. And then they say, right, so we're going to make $8 on every CD you sell, and you're going to make 50 cents, right? But so you sell 100,000 records, and you think, wow, I must have paid them back by now. No, you're paying them back out of the 50 cents.
Oh, yeah.
So the $8 is pure profit on top of that. So you've borrowed, got yourself in debt to make a record that they own, and then they're getting all the profits for. Do you see what I mean?
And then maybe it's so successful that you pay it back and they still own the record. When I go to a bank and I get a mortgage on my house, they loan me the money to buy the house. I take 20 years, I pay it back, then I own the house.
Yes.
Not in the music industry.
Absolutely.
They own the house.
Even
forever.
with huge celebrities like the Rolling Stones and U2.
That's the basic deal. I mean, obviously, the bigger you get, the more power you get, and you can renegotiate.
But it's still the
basic
same
model.
It's still the same. That's still the basic vibe. I mean, you might get a few more dollars. You might get like $2 a record, and the record company gets $6 a record if you're Michael Jackson. But quite frankly, that's the game.
So I looked at this and I said, this is totally unfair and just uninteresting from an artist's perspective. But they had no choice. There was no alternative. You can't have change without an alternative. So fortunately, there was this thing called digital technology arising. And if you were into computers in the early 90s, you were using email. And you knew that email was running on this thing that was called the internet, but no one really heard of it yet. And then around 1994, 1995, the internet started happening. People started using email, and then some people started sending like pictures around through email.
I remember.
And you know that picture
is
just digital version of the physical version of a picture. So the next thing after pictures is music. If you can take a CD, which is already music in a digital form, just maybe compress it a little bit so it's a little bit smaller, and send it over a wire, you're now distributing music. There's no trucks involved. There's no warehouses. There's no retail stores in Times Square. So that is a new distribution model that was emerging in the early mid-90s. And that was what I was basically trying to base my assertion on, that the industry could change. Because if the traditional record industry no longer controlled distribution, then it was anyone's game. There could be new people to enter the market and try to distribute and sell music.
Time that you do it. will swing.
Bananarama with Funboy 3. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it.
You're listening to Aquarian Nation Radio.
One of the things I want to read to you, David, just to let you know. Remember the guy Steve Albini who produced the Nirvana record?
Yeah, of course.
This is what he wrote. He wrote, "Whenever I talk to a band who are about to sign with a major label, I always end up thinking of them in a particular context. I imagine a trench about 4 feet wide and 5 feet deep, maybe 60 yards long, filled with runny, decaying crap. I imagine these people, some of them good friends, some of them barely acquaintances, at one end of this trench. I imagine a faceless industry lackey at the other end, holding a fountain pen and a contract waiting to be signed. Nobody can see what's printed on the contract. It's too far away. And besides, the crap stench is making everybody's eyes water. The lackey shouts to everybody that the first one to swim the trench gets to sign the contract. Everybody dives in the trench and they struggle furiously to get to the other end. 2 people arrive simultaneously and begin wrestling furiously, clawing each other and dunking each other under the crap. Eventually, one of them capitulates and there's only one contestant left. He reaches for the pen, but the lackey says, 'Actually, I think you need a little more development. Swim again, please, backstroke.' And of course he does."
Yep. I think just record labels forgot what they were good at. You know, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, really the birth of contemporary music industry, you had music people who cared about music and looked at budding artists and said, "You've got incredible talent. I want to hook you up with other writers, other artists, other producers." They help truly develop an artist, and very little of that is done anymore. It's more just about, chasing a hit and trying to
Merchandise.
Merchandising. And as Francis alluded to, paying off. I mean, you pay for placement on radio, essentially. You pay for placement on stores.
You pay to get your CDs in the front of a record store.
That's true.
So when people first walk in, you're paying. I think Virgin would. Can I say that? I think there was some record chain were charging $250,000 for a month of having the record placed in the front of the stores, in every stores as you walk in.
Imagine if they did that to Bob Dylan. When he started, where would he be?
That's true. We couldn't get around.
I don't believe there's anything evil behind that. That is capitalism, right? That is simply business people saying, well, we own this store and there is demand to put your record in the front of the store because it's fact that records that sit in the front sell better than records that sit in the back. So if people really want to sell their records, maybe they'll pay us a little bit extra to put it up there. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's just that because the industry evolved that way, it's created a very difficult world for any artist to get through and sell their records. And I think digital technology, the internet, digital distribution of music is the first real challenge to completely undermining and changing the old way of doing things. And it's happening. It's happening today. This is not proselytizing anymore. I mean, it's not 1995 anymore. It's 9 years later, and already it's changed massively. This is